Dragon Ball Super, the long-awaited continuation of the beloved Dragon Ball series. I know a lot of fans, including myself, were extremely excited about this series once it was announced. And Dragon Ball Super has come a long way, from its introduction in 2015 to the recent movie in 2022. There are years of Dragon Ball related material. Unfortunately, this series as a whole ended up being pretty mediocre if I'm being perfectly honest. The series suffers from a lot of different aspects such as writing, artwork, animation, etc. When combined together, really weigh down the series. It has been years since I have seen Dragon Ball Super, and since I like complaining about things, I figured that I'd just go ahead and rewatch the entire series. In this video, I'll be going over each meaningful episode of Dragon Ball Super and pointing out the aspects that I find to be good and bad. With that being said, what's up guys, I am xExotic and it is so good to be back here on YouTube to talk about one of my favorite series. So then, let's go back to the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, starting off in 2015 with the Battle of Gods arc. Before I get into the arc, I have to explain some background information on it. The 14 episode arc in the anime series was heavily based on the movie Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods back in 2013. So the first arc of Super actually does not have a new story to tell, but rather it retells the movie with some changes here and there. But that's okay. I mean, let's say that the writers thought that there were problems with the movie and decided that a series would give them the opportunity to improve on the story. Now, I'll give the series some credit. There are some aspects of the story that were done better than the movie. I'll get into comparisons along the way, but without further ado, let's get into the series. Before I get to the actual episodes, let me first go over the opening song. For Dragon Ball Super, we get our ears cursed by the new song, Chozetsu Dynamic. I really don't like this opening song. I get that Super is supposed to be the Dragon Ball franchise's big return into an animated series, and the tone of the song sounds like a reunion, but the vocals sound so unenthusiastic. I mean, a lot of Dragon Ball's appeal is its exciting moments, and the song doesn't get me excited to watch at all. It is easily the worst Dragon Ball intro song, and unfortunately this song sticks around for 4 story arcs. Luckily, it does get replaced in the final arc of the show, but that is not until episode 77. So for now, I'm just gonna have to deal with it. Watching episode 1 and 2 of Dragon Ball Super is honestly such a massive letdown. The first 2 episodes are meaningless slice of life bits. Now don't get me wrong, I do like seeing the characters go about their lives. And a show that is about action and sometimes adventure, I find the change to be rather pleasing. But this is not how you start a series. The first episode in particular should be about focusing on setting the stage for what the show is about. For example, the first episode of Dragon Ball introduces Goku and Bulma to the audience, the Dragon Balls, and their quest to find them. The first episode of Z introduces Goku's son, Gohan, reintroduces characters now that they are older, establishes that there are now aliens in the world, and introduces Raditz as the antagonist. So what does Super do with its first episode? Well, it has Goku doing farm work, Goten and Trunks finding a wedding present for Videl, and Mr. Satan giving Goku money for defeating Buu. We only get to see the antagonist, Lord Beerus, at the beginning of the episode at a feast where he destroys half of a planet since he wasn't fully satisfied with their dessert. The biggest problem is that nothing important gets set up in this episode. Beerus and his attendant Whis are introduced, and we get to see their personalities on display, but we don't get told anything about these characters. Like, Beerus' whole goal is to find someone who can rival him. The person that he envisioned was from a premonition that he had. This premonition gets introduced in episode 2, and doesn't fully get realized until episode 3. The Battle of Gods movie does everything, all within 8 minutes of film time. So yeah, Dragon Ball Super just wastes time and doesn't do a good job at establishing anything. Basically what I'm trying to say is that the first episode of the series is completely meaningless. Imagine watching a new show and have this be the first episode. It would be terrible, but because it's Dragon Ball, a name everyone knows, is able to get away with this awful beginning. If this series was some random light novel adaptation, then everyone would be making fun of it. But I think that worst of all, the introduction to Dragon Ball Super is extremely boring. In the first episode, nothing interesting is really happening. So how would the series expect viewers, especially the newcomers, to find this interesting? And as for veteran fans of Dragon Ball, were they just expecting us to be interested just based on the fact that this is a new series? Either way, this is an incredibly weak way to begin the start of a new Dragon Ball story, so my scoring for this episode is 1 out of 5. As for episode 2, it is a lot better than episode 1, but I still have problems with it. In this episode, Vegeta, Bulma, and Trunks all go on a family vacation while Goku continues to train on King Kai's world. Meanwhile, Beerus continues destroying more planets and learns that the Super Saiyan God is his opponent. To be honest, I like the slice of life bits with Vegeta. Even though it is not relevant to the story, seeing a character as stubborn and reserved as Vegeta just spend some time with his family is pretty nice for him. Now, unfortunately, this episode is also responsible for something incredibly stupid. At the end of the episode, Vegeta proclaims that he will get stronger and surpass Kakarot and be number 1. You know, I really can't describe how stupid this actually is. In case you forgot, during Goku's fight with Buu, Vegeta realizes exactly why Goku is stronger than him, and he admits that Goku is number 1, putting an end to Vegeta's rivalry with Goku. But in this episode of Super, Vegeta's character development gets completely thrown into the trash, and now he's back to his old petty self. Like, oh come on you guys, you couldn't think of anything to do with this character, like, at all? Personally, I would prefer Vegeta to grow as a person and find a new reason to train and become stronger, and not just because he wants to become better than Goku. Unfortunately, this episode reestablishes that aspect of Vegeta's character that was supposed to be something he overcomes. So my scoring for this episode is 3 out of 5. While I did like this episode, I can't ignore that this is the second episode of a new series, and it does not do a good job in moving the story along. It feels like filler, honestly. However, if this episode existed in a vacuum, then I do think that it is overall good, even if Vegeta's character is being backpedaled, but whatever. Episode 3 is where the story actually starts to get rolling, with Beerus finally discovering that the Super Saiyan God is his opponent, as well as the Supreme Kai is realizing that Beerus is awake. Along with that, Bulma's birthday party begins on a cruise ship, with all the other characters showing up to celebrate. Finally, we have reached this point where the story is actually progressing. Unfortunately, oh god, I'm sure you'll be hearing me say that a lot. Unfortunately, this episode's pacing is total shit. I said before that this arc of Dragon Ball Super is based on the movie that came out a few years prior, right? Well, it's really starting to show now because it feels as if the story is moving ridiculously slow. Trying to stretch out the plot of a movie to fit into 14 20-ish minute episodes isn't going to translate well because you get situations like this where the episode feels slow. Something else that caught my eye was when King Kai was spurring out about being dead. Honestly, I was so confused as to why, because I remember reading the manga and Goku states that Kai was choosing to stay dead to keep Goku company. So with that in mind, why is he upset about being dead now? It's not even like being dead makes a difference anyway. He would just get a halo above his head and that's it. So who gives a shit about being dead? I feel like with the Vegeta character backpedaling and King Kai mad about being dead, no one really went back to read or watch Dragon Ball to make sure that they were being consistent with how these characters are supposed to act. Of course, that's not to say that everything in this episode is bad, because there are good aspects. Once again, I have to praise this series for the slice of life moments. We don't always get to see these type of interactions since the show is all about fighting. I have to specifically point out that the Krillin and 18 scenes were great. Back in the Buu arc, we are told that these two characters have become a couple, yet we never really saw them acting as if they were in a relationship. It makes the relationship feel odd, but Super does a really good job at making it more believable. And that also applies to Vegeta and Bulma too. Another odd couple that works better in Dragon Ball Super. However, something that I completely forgot to point out was that Beerus actually allowed for Planet Vegeta to be destroyed. In this episode, Beerus explains that he let Frieza do it, and that the Saiyans bothered him. This is a fascinating addition to the story of Dragon Ball, and I'm surprised this concept has not been brought up, because this is a major part in Saiyan lore. I really hope that the writers bring back this idea if they ever need to have the main cast fight Beerus again, because this is a very organic way to create conflict within the story. Overall, I'd say this episode is way better than the first two. Those episodes feel like filler, when in actuality it's supposed to be the introduction to the new series. Honestly, Dragon Ball Super could have just started off with this episode, and it would have been a lot better too. My score for this episode is 4 out of 5. Episode 4 goes on to have Beerus make his way to King Kai's world in order to meet Goku, but the main story in this episode is actually surrounding the Pilaf gang. It shows them as children trying to get treasure, and just so happen to be close by the cruise ship that Bulma's birthday party is on. I like the Pilaf gang, and I think that their reintroduction into the series is a mostly good idea. However, because there's always something, the Pilaf gang are shown to be children, and this makes no sense. At this point in time, they should be adults, around the same age as Bulma and Goku. Now I understand that in the movie Battle of the Gods, it is explained that they are children because they wish to become young again. But that explanation is not present in Dragon Ball Super. Why the fuck is that small detail not included in the story? If you've been watching Dragon Ball since the start, and you know exactly who these characters are, you're probably confused as to why the fuck they get reintroduced as children with no explanation. Most likely the writers figured that they didn't need to explain it since it was already in the Battle of the Gods movie, and most people probably saw the movie. The problem with that mentality is that Dragon Ball Super is not a continuation from the movie, but rather a retelling of it. So it does not make sense why the writers would feel okay with leaving out that important information. Besides that, we do get a lot of good exposition on what exactly a God of Destruction is. So Beerus is pretty much a part of the world's balance of life and death, with the Supreme Kais being the life aspect and the God of Destruction being the death aspect. This is good as it adds a lot of lore to the Dragon Ball world, and I love seeing it get expanded in a meaningful way. Although it is kinda confusing as to why the Supreme Kai are so much weaker than the God of Destruction. And not only that, their roles in the universe are massively skewed in a way where the universe's destroyer god has the much more important role. If they're supposed to create balance, then why aren't they equal to each other? Or at least have their own strengths and weaknesses. Anyway, yeah, so again, another middle of the road episode for me, with things that I liked but also things that annoyed me. My score for this episode is 3 out of 5. And here we are at episode 5. This is a pretty big episode as it is the first ever action-focused episode in the series. It is also the point where the fanbase really started to be critical of Dragon Ball Super, but don't you worry, we'll get there when we get there. So the main story for this episode is the fight between Goku and Beerus. Goku goes through the 3 Super Saiyan forms and can't even land a hit on Beerus, and when he finally counterattacks, he completely demolishes Goku. Afterwards, Beerus makes his way to Earth to question Vegeta about the Super Saiyan God. Oh boy, in this episode, there are just so many problems. Firstly, let's address the elephant in the room, the artwork. You see, in the original broadcasting of Dragon Ball Super, the artwork was incredibly bad. So bad, in fact, that even the average viewers were starting to shit on the series. Reviews were being posted about how boring and terribly animated the fight was, and many memes were born from this episode. They would later fix the art in the Blu-ray version of the series, but yeah, I remember watching this show as episodes were coming out, and oh my god, did it look terrible with Goku constantly going off model. Other than that, this episode is so slow. In the movie version, this fight goes by pretty quick, but in the series, the fight is just Goku missing punches and transforming into higher levels of Super Saiyan. Repeat that 3 times and bang, episode 5 of Dragon Ball Super. Such a boring fight, absolutely terrible execution. I also found it odd that Beerus sees Goku and questions if he could defeat Frieza. At this point in the series, Goku could effortlessly defeat Frieza, so Beerus saying that is a strange assessment that doesn't make any sense. But if he's judging Goku based off his character, okay, yeah, I get where he's coming from. I will say, when Beerus fights back, it is pretty cool. I really like how he effortlessly finishes off Goku. My man literally doesn't even try, he just pushes Goku and that knocks his ass out. He does a great job at demonstrating Beerus' power and dominance. What wasn't very impressive was Goku's Kamehameha. He uses it and the beam hits King Kai's world and creates a hole in it. Honestly, it's not that impressive. I definitely like the movie version where Goku punches the planet and creates a hole, cause it just makes the Kamehameha look kinda weak low-key. Overall, this episode fucking sucks. It's super dragged out and uninteresting. There clearly was not enough material to make a full episode, and it shows. My score for this episode is a 1 out of 5. So, episode 6 is the first actual good episode in the series so far. I know, I can't believe that we actually have a good episode either. This episode has Beerus arrive at Bulma's party, and Vegeta desperately trying to keep him happy. And this episode ends with Beerus getting mad at Majin Buu over pudding and starts fighting. Overall, this was a fantastic episode. It's about time. The writing in this was really strong compared to the previous episodes. When Vegeta meets Beerus, the tone drastically shifts to become more tense. We learned that as a child, Vegeta had seen Lord Beerus completely humiliate his father. In this one scene, it accomplishes so much. Firstly, it expands on Beerus' character. We already knew that he could be extremely destructive and petty, but we also learned that a deciding factor in his destruction is respect. He hates being disrespected, so when King Vegeta tries to give Beerus the second most comfy pillow and not the first, he gets angry with him. Another aspect that the scene accomplished was making Beerus seem intimidating and an actual threat to our characters. He's so scary that the paralyzing fear that Vegeta has as a child starts to affect him as he is approached by Beerus as an adult. This makes Vegeta's fear understandable and why he would jump through hoops in order to maintain Beerus' happiness. Something else that I thought was done better here than in the movie version was Vegeta's freakout scene. In the movie, Beerus gets angry and is about to destroy Earth, but Vegeta steps in and does this silly bingo dance to distract Beerus. It's funny, yeah, I won't deny that, but it's kinda weird and out of character for Vegeta. I'm not too sure who thought of having Vegeta sing and dance to bingo, but it was pretty awkward. In the series, Vegeta makes note of how food calms Beerus, so when he gets upset, Vegeta rushes to make him food. This works better since we have constantly been shown that Beerus enjoys food, so to have that be the factor that calms him down makes perfect sense. Something else that's worth noting was the camera angles. In a lot of the shots that Beerus is in, it is from a low angle. This conveys his dominating presence and power in an interesting way. And when Vegeta looks at him, he is sometimes drawn with these intense shadows. I love this. It's not every day where Dragon Ball decides to do this, and man, Toei sure did a great job with this episode. My ranking for this episode is 5 out of 5. Absolutely brilliant. Episode 7 begins continuing the fight between everyone and Beerus. No one stands a chance against them, and they all easily get beaten. This episode ends with Vegeta finally losing it after seeing Bulma get hit, and gets so angry that he is finally ready to fight Beerus. I think that the episode almost did everything perfectly. It stumbles at the end, but I'll get into that later. Let's start off with some positives first. I absolutely love every interaction between Vegeta and Beerus. There is a scene where Vegeta tries to fight, but is paralyzed by fear, and it was done so incredibly well. When he is put into a similar position his father once was, I felt extremely invested into the story. So I have to give a lot of credit to the writing and direction for this episode. I also wanted to point out that the beginning of this episode is actually kind of funny too. The scene with Gotenks had me smiling the entire time. It has this child arguing with Beerus, and how he is the one acting childish, freaking out over pudding. Watching Beerus try to justify his behavior, comedically stating how he will never understand what pudding is like, is genuinely entertaining. I really like this humor, and it didn't feel out of place despite there being a lot of tension with the fate of the Earth on the line. I mentioned before that Dragon Ball Super stretches out its episodes in order to fit the plot of the movie. Well, in this episode, it's also done. However, it is done in a much more organic way. The way that Super does it is to have Whis be the one to delay the Earth's destruction by eating food and having Beerus wait for him. This is a much better way to drag out the story rather than have everything move at a snail's pace. Going over the negative aspects of this episode, something that I noticed while watching was Piccolo not being able to sense Beerus' ki. I know that the ki of a god is unable to be sensed by mortals, but in the case of Piccolo, it was shown previously that he was able to sense the Supreme Kai, who is a god. But now he can't sense God Ki and has to ask about Beerus' power? It just does not make sense based on what we have been shown before. Oh great, an inconsistency in an episode that I actually like. Damn it, Super. Of course, I can't talk about this episode without going over the My Bulma scene. Here I might piss off some people. I'm sure you know where this is going, so I'll just say it. The scene is low-key really stupid. It's good, but there are aspects in it that don't make sense. Okay, so firstly, Bulma slapping Beerus. I do like how Bulma, despite being a powerless human, takes a stand against a god. I can respect Bulma for doing that. She's a lot more brave than one might expect. When Beerus retaliates, he smacks her back in a very dramatic way, knocking her out and sending her flying. As I'm watching this, I'm not only shocked, but I'm also surprised that Bulma even survives this. In the movie version, Bulma also slapped Beerus, but when she gets slapped back, it's a very small slap and she just gets knocked out. It's very obvious that Beerus was holding back and used a small amount of strength to deal with her. But in this version, Beerus full-on backhands Bulma and her ass gets sent flying. There's no way that she would have survived this. So far in the series, we have seen that Beerus can render even the most powerful fighters useless without even having to touch him. So to see him actually strike someone, it should have killed her if I'm being realistic. It doesn't make sense how she survived a blow like that. And don't even tell me that Beerus was holding back. There are no implications in that scene to imply that he was holding back. In fact, the direction of the scene would imply the opposite. The only other negative thing I have to say so far is that slap scene and Vegeta's reaction to it is really drawn out. I would have preferred this go by much more quickly. But even so, I still thought that this episode was great. I love the characters and the action, so my scoring for this episode is 4 out of 5. So, episode 8 continues from where episode 7 left off, with Vegeta ready to go on the offense against Beerus. Despite giving it all he's got, none of his attacks even faze Beerus, and Vegeta gets knocked easily once Beerus counterattacks. Before destroying Earth, Beerus decides to give Earth another chance because of how tasty the food is. Knowing that no one has power to fight him, Beerus puts the fate of the planet on the line with a game of rock, paper, scissors. Out of everyone, he picks Oolong. They tie with scissors twice before Oolong loses to Beerus' rock. So, Beerus flies up and is about to destroy Earth again, but Goku shows up just in time to stop him. His plan is to use the Dragon Balls to have Shenron help Beerus find the Super Saiyan God. The episode ends with the plan about to go in motion. Okay, this episode was bad. It had an exciting start with Vegeta fighting Beerus. But of course he stood no chance, so he got taken out quickly, leaving the rest of the episode about the rock, paper, scissors match. Honestly, this fight wasn't that good. At the beginning of it, Vegeta charges at Beerus, and the animation is basically non-existent. In the scene, Vegeta's just standing there while the energy just surrounds him. Yeah, clearly this is just a still of Vegeta. Unfortunately, the fight is very lazy when it comes to the animation. When Vegeta gets hit by Beerus, he gets spun around and it's so poorly done. It's like when you're in Photoshop and you grab the corner of an image and just rotate it around. It's incredibly bad. A positive half of the scene is that it removes a line that was in the movie version. In the movie version, as Vegeta fights, Roshi points out that seeing Bulma get hit angered Vegeta so much that he became stronger than Goku. This line is so stupid for like 2 reasons. Firstly, how the hell would Roshi know that? It's not like Goku was around to give a fair comparison. Secondly, and more importantly, that is not how Rage Boosts work in the series. Yes, I'm aware that they exist for Gohan. The Rage Boosts happen with Gohan because it is a part of his character. Gohan is very peaceful and kind, so during fights he cannot use his full potential. It's only when he gets pushed emotionally does he access the hidden power temporarily. The reason why a Rage Boost wouldn't work for other characters such as Vegeta is because they don't have that mental block that is stopping them from fighting at their full strength. And if you want even further proof, in the fight against Cell, we got to see Vegeta's rage when Cell killed a son. Vegeta got so mad, he charged at Cell, unleashing his power, but he didn't kill Cell, nor did Vegeta get any stronger from his anger. It makes no sense why in the movie version, he now suddenly gets the Rage Boost, so I'm glad they removed that line in this version. Although Beerus does say that Vegeta was more entertaining than Goku. However, because the line doesn't definitively state that Vegeta is stronger, I'll ignore it. What I do agree, however, is that the Vegeta fight was more entertaining. I mean, episode 5 was boring as hell. Ain't no one gonna be entertained by that shit. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to go into depth on Rage Boost since this episode allows me to bring it up. We will see another Rage Boost from Goku later on, and while I do think it's stupid there too, I won't be getting to that episode anytime soon. Okay, rant over, let's continue. So Beerus and Oolong have a game of rock, paper, scissors, and it was dragged out for such a long time. They tied twice, which is only there to pad out this episode's runtime. I like the idea of the game, but I just felt that it was too long, which makes it incredibly boring. I've said this line already, but I'll say it here again. There clearly was not enough material to make a full episode. Something that I really liked, however, was the despair and hopelessness. While watching, I really felt the despair the characters were feeling, knowing that they are completely powerless to stop their planet's destruction. The music helped sell the scene, with the track being really sad. Unfortunately, Super does what Super does best and fucks up the scene by dramatically shifting the tone. Goku shows up and this really upbeat, goofy ass music starts playing. I understand that the tone needed to become more uplifting because Goku showing up should invoke a feeling of hope. But hope is not what they went for. It's silly and out of place. The music should have just been hopeful, and because it wasn't, it kinda ruins the scene for me. Moving on, I really like the idea of using the Dragon Balls to find out answers on the Super Saiyan God. For so long, this series has reserved the Dragon Balls as a way to revive characters, which is a problem, but that's for another video. What I wanted to say is that it is interesting seeing these characters use the Dragon Balls in a unique way. They don't know something, so they are just using the Dragon Balls to wish for it. Kinda cool to see them be utilized this way. But even so, I really think that overall, this episode is a major letdown. Episode 7 really hyped this one up, ending with Vegeta fighting. But with the poor animation and the interesting but lackluster rock paper scissors game, episode 8 really drops the ball. So my scoring for this episode is 2. Hey, wait a minute, I totally forgot to talk about the Pilaf gang. Yeah, so they're in this episode escaping the boat. They have this argument about forgetting their food and they realize that they need to get it back. Yeah, that's it. Again, what is the point of this scene? Seriously, the Pilaf gang so far have no purpose in the story at all. They don't contribute to anything, so why are they even here? I don't understand why Super decided to include these classic characters only to do nothing with them and just waste my time. They are so unimportant that I even forgot to include them in my review. Holy shit. Like, you know what? Fuck you, episode 8. My new scoring for this episode is 1 out of 5. Hopefully the next episode will make up for this one, but I mean, realistically, probably won't. Episode 9 begins with the summoning of Shenron to ask about the Super Saiyan God. Once figuring out that Super Saiyan God needs to be created through a ritual, the Saiyan characters go ahead and hold hands, transferring their power to Goku. It doesn't work because they need 6 Saiyans to transfer their energy into one of them, so of course they now can't do the ritual since there are only 5. But suddenly Videl steps in and reveals that she is pregnant with Gohan's child, and that there is a chance that the unborn baby can count as the 6th Saiyan. They try it out, and it works! And after a long transformation scene, Goku becomes a Super Saiyan God. I was excited for this episode, I really was. This was the episode where Goku was supposed to transform into a god. I had my hopes up, and boy, did this episode fall flat on its face. Yeah, another bad episode, who could have guessed, right? Firstly, let's go over the Shenron scene because Super, once again, loves to fuck things up. So, the problem with the scene was that it went by way too quick. Shenron is summoned, and all the dragon has to say is how the Super Saiyan God is summoned, and nothing else. In the movie version, Shenron also gives a backstory on the original Saiyan who transformed into a god, providing an explanation as to why this transformation even exists. In Dragon Ball Super, there is no backstory. At all. Why? This is a series. It has the benefit of a longer runtime than a movie, so they should have used this extra time to better explain the lore behind the transformation. Like, how would knowledge of a transformation that temporarily turns a mortal into a god just vanish? It makes no sense. They even include this line where Bulma questions Vegeta on why he doesn't know of it, to no response. Oh my god, this writing trope fucking sucks. They do this thing where they acknowledge that something doesn't make sense in hopes that we can excuse it not making sense. And another confusing bit was where the information of the Super Saiyan God came from. Shenron says that the written legends of Planet Namek has the details of the transformation. What the fuck is the written legends of Planet Namek? This written legends of Planet Namek has never been brought up before, and it being brought up now just ends up opening a whole other can of worms. Like, why the fuck did the Namekians, out of all the aliens and planets in Dragon Ball, have information that turns Saiyans into gods? If the Super Saiyan God is so unheard of that the Saiyans themselves don't even remember its existence, how the hell would the Namekians know of it? See, this is what happens when you start pulling shit out of nowhere. You just make things more confusing. We are only like 7.5 minutes into episode 9 and I'm already losing my mind. Super continues to fuck things up by ruining Vidal's pregnancy reveal. This should have been a tender moment, a happy and heartwarming scene where all the characters gather around and congratulate Vidal. In the movie version, this happens. It's honestly a good scene, so I'm not too sure why Super makes it shitty. What Super gets wrong is the tone. Vidal's pregnancy is handled in an extremely goofy way, with the characters getting surprised in a cartoon-like fashion. And instead of all the characters around Vidal, only Mr. Satan and Chi-Chi are there in support. Basically, the scene is just terrible and was handled extremely poorly, especially in comparison to the movie version. Moving on, let me go over Goku's transformation into a Super Saiyan God. I will say that overall, it was a massive missed opportunity to create an iconic transformation. I do like how the transformation requires more than just the Saiyans transferring their energy into one. They need to give one Saiyan their heart or light. It does make this godly transformation feel more special, more important. I really like this concept and I'm glad they included that in. Something that I also liked was the environmental changes. Transformation was so godly that the sky and the sea turned gold and the clouds opened up above them. I think that in general the atmosphere really helped sell this transformation as something divine. Although I do think that the series does go a bit overboard with the environment. I mean, it starts raining, hailing, the day and night cycle starts rapidly changing. It's a bit too over the top for me and it really takes away the epicness of the transformation. And lastly, once the transformation is complete, I absolutely love the music that plays. I believe the track is called The Infinite Universe, and man, this track is beautiful. It's very inspiring, hopeful, and calm. It fits the Super Saiyan God transformation perfectly. I gotta give credit where it's due, they really ended that transformation scene strong. But unfortunately, my praise ends there. The reason why I say the scene is a miss would be the other elements surrounding the transformation. Firstly, it's just so damn long. The whole transformation is like 8 minutes, and it really feels that the transformation is being stretched out in order to pad out this episode's runtime. It's made even worse once you realize that the other characters are just standing there holding hands. Like the camera switches to focus on the environment, the other characters, and then go back to the main group of 6. When the camera focuses back on them, you realize, hey, nothing really happened since the last time we saw them. The transformation was just way too long, and it would have benefited more if it was shorter. In the movie version, it was short and was amazingly done. So it's disappointing that the series cannot make this scene better. However, something that absolutely kills the scene for me are the god-awful distractions. Like I said, the transformation is incredibly long, and we get to see different aspects that surround it, such as the reactions of other characters. There are 2 stupid gags thrown in. One with the Pilaf gang getting into a whirlpool, and the other with Roshi being in a hailstorm. These gags only weigh down the scene. They aren't funny, and they distract the viewer from what they should be focusing on. I know that they probably did this to pad the runtime, but it was a terrible call. This easily could have been one of the best transformations in Dragon Ball. Speaking of the form, let's go over the look. So, Super Saiyan God. This form gives the user red hair, red eyes, and a leaner body type. Honestly, I do like this form a lot. I do understand that this form and the next one after it get a lot of hate because they are essentially recolors of older forms. This God form is just Goku with red hair and a skinny body. I get why people might not like it, but I always like the idea that Goku's God form is just his normal looking self but with divine ki. I never really liked the idea that the Super Saiyan God form needed to be this over-the-top complicated design. I think this form looks good, and I particularly really like the God Ki that surrounds Goku as well. Now that's some cool looking ki. So this is just a minor thing that I already brought up before, but I'll say it again. Why does Piccolo turn to Dende to ask if Goku achieved the God form? Piccolo can sense God Ki! What the fuck, are the writers just forgetting the continuity of the show? I know it's not that important, but I still get annoyed at shit like this. Overall, this episode had a lot of good ideas and elements, but they get buried underneath the bad, and for me, it makes what could have been a great episode into a mediocre one. Also, basically every episode so far has meh art. The characters always go off model, and that's just something that can be applied to every episode, so I'm not going to constantly bring it up. But just know that almost every episode of Super has looked like shit. Anyway, my score for this episode is 2 out of 5. Finally, we reach the big fight between Goku and Beerus. It first starts off slow, with Goku having to adjust himself to his new strength. Becoming a god has granted himself power that is nothing like what he is normally used to, and after throwing many attacks, Goku still can't land a hit on Beerus. But he steadily starts improving as he is now able to successfully block his attacks, and the episode ends with Goku finally able to land a hit on Beerus. Honestly, this episode is very good, with only a few annoying aspects. Let me begin by saying that I did enjoy how the fight starts off slower. The reason is because Goku needed to adjust to his new power. We have learned that in the series that when obtaining new power, it does take time and practice in order to make full use of it. Like when Goku and Gohan train their bodies to handle Super Saiyan. And this concept will continue to be a part of the series, and I really like this a lot actually. It gains more mileage out of a single transformation. I really like that there is more depth to obtaining power. As for the fight itself, I found it to actually be fun. It was exciting to see Goku be able to actually land a hit on Beerus when no one could even touch him before. I also really like the flick and the neck chop Goku does. It's a callback to what Beerus did in episode 5. Besides the fact that it was kind of fun to see, I felt that it was totally in character for Goku to do something like that. And the animation during these scenes was actually pretty good as well. It looked fluid whenever a punch or kick was thrown. So finally, the animation steps up its game. How long that'll last, I don't know, but I'm gonna enjoy it while I can. Something that is very subtle is the relationship between Goku and Beerus. At first, Beerus doesn't really take Goku seriously, but now that he has become a god, you can see how differently he treats him. Beerus wants to be challenged, so he tests Goku's abilities, very subtly training him in the process. I really like this because it feels like a natural progression for these characters. To compare this series to the movie version, I'm actually going to have to give props to the series once again. In the movie version, Goku and Beerus have this weird dialogue where Goku expresses dissatisfaction upon becoming a Super Saiyan God because it was a power that he could not achieve on his own and had to rely on his friends and family to obtain. This dissatisfaction literally makes no sense coming out of Goku's mouth. Why is he suddenly having an issue with receiving help? This is the same guy who had trained under multiple masters who had taught him valuable lessons and techniques. Heck, even one of Goku's most powerful attacks is the Spirit Bomb, which requires energy to be gathered from other sources across the planet or universe even. So this prideful character trait that the movie gives Goku is totally stupid and out of character for him. Because of that, I'll give a lot of credit to the series for correcting that mischaracterization. But of course, this wouldn't be a super review unless there was some stupidity in it. So, the Pilaf gang returns to the ship again in order to get the Dragon Balls. Why are they still a part of this story? They don't contribute to the story at all! On top of that, why are they even trying to get the Dragon Balls anyway? When they realized the Dragon Balls were on the ship, they were already being used, and after the Dragon Balls are used, they scatter across the planet. The Pilaf gang knows that, they've seen them before, so why are they confused about the Dragon Balls not being there? Just stupid writing, that's why. Of course, the stupidity doesn't end there, because Piccolo brings up how they cannot sense God Ki. Again, Piccolo can sense God Ki! Or can he? This is, I believe, the third time I brought this up, so I wanted to double check the manga just to be sure. So Piccolo is in the ring with Kaioshin and feels uneasy around him, but doesn't know why since he's never met him before. He ends up forfeiting the match and Goku asks if he is strong and Piccolo says yes. The difference between us is too great. With the new super lore, a lot of people try to explain this by stating that it could be that Piccolo could be tapping into Kami's knowledge or just feeling the pressure. But at the same time, how would Piccolo know the strength of Kaioshin? We later learn that compared to our heroes, Kaioshin really isn't all that strong. So why would Piccolo hype up his strength like that? So going forward, I'm just gonna leave it up to the audience to come to their own conclusions. I don't know. But even with that, this episode is still great. I'm very happy to see that the episodes are getting better, and hopefully this trend of good episodes continues. So my scoring for this episode is 4 out of 5. Episode 11. I really got my hopes up for this one, and oh boy did it deliver! This episode was amazing! It had everything I was looking for in a fighting episode. There actually were no real flaws in this episode either, so I'm excited to talk about this one. This episode continues the fighting between Goku and Beerus. This time, Goku is actually able to land hits on Beerus consistently. Even still, Beerus admits that he is holding back, and once he starts to fight more aggressively, the tide of the battle changes completely. Goku gets smacked around, and Beerus expresses how disappointed he is since he really wanted Goku to be a challenge for him. He reveals that all the attacks Goku has been doing do not affect him at all. He continues to test Goku, sending ki blasts at him to defend against. Not satisfied, Beerus then just stabs Goku, sending him falling back to Earth. Once he lands in the water, Goku then realizes how excited he is to fight a strong opponent like Beerus. So he pulls himself together, he gets healed, and rushes back into the fight. Let me begin by stating that the action was incredible. Whenever Beerus attacked Goku, I really felt the damage he dealt was conveyed properly, so as a viewer, I can understand how strong he is. When dealing with a series like Dragon Ball where characters are ridiculously powerful, it can be kinda hard to determine strength since it's scaled so high. But here, I knew exactly where they stood. Another thing about the fight was the memorable moments. In most shows about fighting, there is always that one moment that is really impactful, making it stand out. In this episode, there actually were a few. The first one I noticed was when Beerus got hit by Goku and was sent flying back. He bumps into clouds and cartoonishly bounces off of them. It's a small thing I know, but I just thought it was fun. It's a nice little detail that helps make the fight interesting to watch. I really love it when animators do little things like this, I really appreciate it. These memorable moments don't stop there either. There is this funny scene where Goku and Beerus start to fight dirty, with Goku biting Beerus' tail, Beerus slapping Goku, Goku yelling in Beerus' ear, and Beerus pulling on Goku's nose. And of course, there's that scene where Beerus plays with his ki as if it were a soccer ball. I felt as if these moments added some charm to the episode. Beerus is not some wickedly evil guy, he's a god of destruction, which is a part of the universe's balance. Sure, he can be petty and short-tempered, but we've also seen him be relaxed and excited over new foods. He's characterized fantastically. This is why I feel as if these more silly moments work well for him. While there are silly moments, there are lots of serious moments too. There was that scene when Goku grabbed Beerus' ki attack and just smashed it until it broke. It was so unique seeing something like that, so I gotta give a lot of props to the writers for coming up with something so interesting. Of course, there's that other moment when Beerus just blasts Goku around. I thought it was pretty cool seeing Beerus switch gears and dominate the fight so quickly, doing so in a visually interesting way. Finally, there is the Kamehameha. It's always awesome seeing a big Kamehameha, and this one especially since it not only was cool, but it also showed us, and even Beerus, how much Goku had improved during their fight. I love it when moments like this can serve multiple purposes. The relationship between Beerus and Goku is something that I also want to bring up again. I mentioned that in episode 10 that Beerus is testing Goku. Well, that gets brought up by the Kais as well. They speculate that Beerus is doing this for his enjoyment. Even Goku theorizes that since Beerus is so strong and no one can challenge him as full strength, that it's not fun for him. While Beerus does tell Goku that he's wrong, it's pretty clear that Goku's assessment was correct. Beerus is looking for a challenge. He imagined the Super Saiyan God was this worthy opponent for him to fight, and he even gets very upset when he believes that Goku isn't what he thought he would be. I really like this. We get to see character development during the fight, which feels very natural. Beerus isn't the only character to shine, however. Goku gets a really amazing moment as well. So, Beerus gets disappointed by Goku and stabs him. Goku falls but then comes to his senses after realizing how excited he is to fight someone like Beerus. So he heals up and flies right back to Beerus to continue the fight. I love this so much! This is Goku! Goku, even when facing opponents far stronger than him, he never gives up. Every time he gets knocked down, he always gets back up stronger than before. I love this aspect of Goku's character, and I'm glad I got to see his never give up attitude on display. It's a very powerful and admirable outlook to have. With that in mind, I thought this episode was basically perfect. It did everything right. Even the art and animation were on point too. So of course, I'm giving this episode a 5 out of 5. Great job, Super. This was brilliant. As this fight continued on, I got more excited and pleased to see that Dragon Ball Super was starting to get really good. So you can imagine my disappointment when episode 12 failed to live up to what episode 10 and 11 were building up. This episode continues from the last where Goku gets back into the fight after being stabbed by Beerus. They build up power and clash fists that cause shockwaves in the universe. These shockwaves damage the universe and enough of them could destroy everything. But Goku figures out that if they clash at the right angle and at the right amount of force, the shockwaves cancel out. They continue to fight more, but this time Goku is improving at matching Beerus' hits. So he decides to throw a big ki ball at Goku and Goku responds with the Kamehameha. This creates more shockwaves. As Goku's about to lose, he finds the power within him to push back Beerus' attack, and the episode ends with the shockwaves spreading out once again due to their ki blast clashing. Okay, first off, I just want to say that I really didn't like this episode. While I don't think it was the worst, there were a lot of terrible aspects that really make this episode bad. Probably the most irritating aspect of this episode was the fight. Most of the fight is just Goku and Beerus screaming at each other, powering up and clashing hits. I really hate this. Screaming, powering up, and universe-destroying power is literally what Dragon Ball is stereotyped to be. As a fan of this franchise, I know that there is more to the series than that, but with episodes like this, it's hard to combat that stereotype. More importantly, it makes the fight boring. I do not want to watch Goku and Beerus scream and power up for the majority of the episode. Powering up doesn't make the fight interesting. Secondly, I want to talk about how this episode takes away the focus on the fight to instead focus on how the fight affects the world. I'm invested in the fight. I really don't care all that much about other things, like how Mr. Satan is trying to cover up the battle, or how the old Kai is horny, or how Vegeta is just staring into space watching the fight when I know damn well he can't see shit from that spot. These cutaways take away from what should be the focus, the fight between Goku and Beerus. The most interesting thing that happened this episode was the new concept introduced. Goku and Beerus' hits are so powerful that they create shockwaves that can destroy the universe if they keep happening. Okay, firstly, I really don't like how powerful the character's gotten. So they can clash fists and destroy the universe? That seems way too overpowered considering that this is only the first arc of the show. Not that it matters anyway, since universe-destroying shockwaves will be a drop concept by the next arc. And that's a problem as well. Why even bother making it at a point when it won't even be relevant by the next arc? It's lame as fuck when shows do this. It feels like the shockwaves are only really there to artificially raise the stakes. They never really get brought up again, and I'm glad they won't because they're stupid. Speaking of stupid, the power-ups and the screaming leads to this visually interesting scene where Goku and Beerus' ki turns into dragons. I say interesting not because it's good, but rather because it's unique, ? I didn't think that it was all that cool, it just came out of nowhere, no build-up or anything. The only good thing in this episode was the Kamehameha. Goku is about to get hit by Beerus' attack, but he finds the strength in him to push through. Breaking his own limit is an aspect of Goku's character that I really like, but I hate that Goku admits out loud that Beerus won and that he's at his limit. Like, I get it, Goku's saying that he reached his limit so when he does break the limit, it can be exciting for both Beerus and the audience. But Goku would not say that out loud. Even if Goku knew that he was at his limit, he wouldn't say it out loud and admit defeat like that. It was very out of character for Goku to admit defeat, and I don't like how this good moment was at the expense of Goku's character. Overall, this episode was pretty bad. The animation was awful with many reused bits, the story kept cutting away to other characters, and the fight was uninteresting. It sucks because episodes 10 and 11 were good, and I was really hoping that Super would continue this good episode streak. That didn't happen, so my scoring for this episode is 1 out of 5. Terrible episode. To my surprise, episode 13 really picked it back up. It started off really weak, but once it got into the second half of the episode, things started to get good again. Of course, this episode picks up where the last left off with the universe not being destroyed from the shockwaves. Instead, the ki attacks merge into this ki ball that both Goku and Beerus are trying to push towards each other. However, the amount of power in that ki ball is so great that it could easily destroy Earth and neighboring planets if it were to explode. Mr. Satan tries to plead with Whis to no use. As Goku and Beerus continue to struggle, the ki blast gets more intense as it explodes. Everyone is still okay though, since Beerus uses power to neutralize the blast. After this, Goku and Beerus continue to fight using martial arts. Unfortunately, Goku's god power runs out and he returns to his Super Saiyan form. While it does seem hopeless, Goku ends up retaining the strength that he had from the god form as it has now become a part of himself. So in other words, he absorbs the strength from the form despite no longer being a god. Pleased by this, Beerus and Goku continue to fight. Okay, this episode was a lot better than the last. My biggest issue was the first half of the episode, so let's get into the negatives first. I got annoyed with how the ki blast scene was handled. Now, if you're familiar with Dragon Ball, you know that one of the series' most iconic moments are beam struggles. Beam struggles are when characters launch ki attacks at each other, causing them to collide. It ends with one character overpowering the other and causing their ki attack to hit the opponent. We have seen this before with Goku and Vegeta, as well as Gohan and Cell. With that in mind, the struggle between Goku and Beerus was done so poorly, it's embarrassing. First of all, the original attacks were Beerus' purple ki ball and Goku's Kamehameha. Suddenly they have merged into this tiny little ball that they are trying to get control over. It's really weird and goofy seeing these characters grunt and struggle to push this small ki ball. On top of that, the visuals didn't help either. It didn't convey to me that this was an intense moment at all. And this ki struggle lasts for like the first half of this episode. It was really boring and I didn't like it. Another aspect of this ki struggle I didn't like was Beerus' ki neutralization. So we learned that Beerus can neutralize ki, and that's why the ki ball doesn't destroy everything. While I do not have a problem with Beerus having that ability, it does come across as a cop-out. It just feels like the writers gave him that power in order to come up with an excuse as to why the blast didn't kill everyone. It's a really cool power, but the timing to introduce it felt cheap. I also really don't like the explanation that Olkai gives as to why Goku and Beerus' attacks don't create shockwaves. So after the ki ball gets neutralized, Goku and Beerus start to fight using martial arts. What doesn't make sense as to why they aren't creating shockwaves, since in the last episode, it was established that they would. Well, the Olkai explains that, and I quote, "The shockwaves were a show, and now they're both just fighting like they want it to end." Like, what the fuck does that even mean? So the shockwaves aren't happening because they are fighting like they want it to end? As if they weren't trying to beat each other this entire time? Yeah, fuck you, Dragon Ball Super, that's not an explanation. See, this is what pisses me off. The show explains this new stupid concept, like universe-destroying shockwaves, and then doesn't even explain why they are no longer happening. And remember, the shockwaves won't come back either. This concept gets dropped by the next episode. So it makes me wonder, what was the point in introducing shockwaves if they aren't even going to be around in the series? This show is so annoying sometimes. But not all hope is lost. The second half of the episode is actually pretty good. So Goku and Beerus start a fight using martial arts rather than the universe-destroying punches. I always liked it when Dragon Ball stopped focusing on the giant power-ups and instead focus on the martial arts, since I believe that's what makes the fight interesting to watch. Like when we see Goku headbutt Beerus, it sticks with us more than seeing Goku and Beerus create universe-destroying shockwaves. The fighting was really good, and I loved how it involved martial arts. I also kinda liked how Mr. Saiyan tried to bargain with Whis. He tries to convince him to stop Goku and Beerus and uses a food voucher as a bargaining chip. I always thought it was interesting seeing characters try and creatively resolve things without needing to fight. It didn't work, but it was a good effort. But the thing that I loved the most out of all was that despite losing his god powers, Goku doesn't get discouraged at all. He states that he doesn't feel any weaker, and Beerus states that his body had absorbed the divine aura, making Goku's body stronger. I like the scene because of Goku's reaction to Beerus' assessment. You see, Beerus had started to notice that Goku's god powers were running out, and he thought that the fight was over. He gets surprised that Goku could still keep up with him. Goku isn't bothered that his powers have faded, but instead, he just feels satisfied that he can still fight. This is Goku. Character is really important in a story, as it can influence how much we like or dislike a story. And I really like how moments like these perfectly demonstrate the character of Goku and why I love Dragon Ball so much. Overall, this episode was okay. The first half was bad with a boring ki struggle, but the second half was great with amazing martial arts action and fantastic character moments. Unfortunately, the first half really weighs down what would be a great episode. So my scoring for this episode is 3 out of 5. And here we are, episode 14. We have finally made it to the end of the Battle of the Gods arc of Dragon Ball Super. After watching this episode, honestly, I was very impressed. This episode is great all around, so let's get into it. This episode continues the scene between Goku and Beerus. Goku has lost his god powers and has returned to his Super Saiyan form. Unfortunately for Goku, he begins to lose the fight, getting whooped by Beerus. He throws everything, but with Beerus' ki nullification, not even the Kamehameha can beat him. As Beerus starts to overpower Goku, he uses a lot of his energy to send Beerus and himself back into space. This ultimately ends up draining Goku's power, and Beerus tries to end the fight with a flick to the forehead, the same move he used against Goku in episode 5. As Goku's falling back to Earth, he remembers his loved ones and musters all of his remaining strength to come back to the fight to Beerus' surprise. Knowing that he can't continue, Goku uses every last bit of energy to fire a Kamehameha at Beerus, and he counterattacks with his own ki attack. The two energies collide and merge to form this massive ki ball. Beerus is able to take control of the ki and sends it towards Goku. He tries to hold it back, but Beerus gives him more energy, making it too much for Goku to handle. Using whatever energy he has left, Goku just punches that ki ball and destroys it. Exhausted, Goku tells Beerus that even if he is a god, He could not tell him that he reached his limit. Goku then passes out and falls back to Earth as Vegeta catches him. As Beerus descends, everyone is ready to fight him, even if it's pointless. Beerus attacks, but his attack completely misses. He ends up falling asleep, and Whis informs everyone that the fight tired Beerus out. Of course, this was all just an act. Beerus purposely fell asleep because in reality, he didn't want to destroy Earth, but he also didn't want to go back on his word. After that, everyone starts to relax as once again, the world was saved. Wow, what a great way to end this arc. Let me begin by saying that I really like the fight between Goku and Beerus. They continue to use more traditional martial arts and take the fight into different areas. When the fight went underwater, I was pretty excited since we usually never see fights underwater. Hell, we usually never see fights in space either. It was so cool. As for the combat, it was done really well here. I felt as if every hit dealt had actual impact and weight behind it. This time around, Goku played more heavily into the underdog role, and seeing him use everything he's got against Beerus was amazing. Something notable that I liked about the fight was the message that it gives at the end. Just because you are stronger or in a position of power doesn't mean that you can decide the limits of others. In this episode alone, we have been shown Goku getting knocked down and getting back up again and again to Beerus' shock. Surpassing your limits has always been a theme within the series, and I'm glad that after all these years it's still being applied. But most importantly, I like this episode because of how Goku was characterized. I know that I've brought up Goku's characterization before, but for this episode I really wanted to get into it. So despite being beaten down and using up everything he has, Goku still gives it everything he's got to the bitter end. In fact, this fight only ends because Goku passes out, because he literally used everything he had to stop Beerus. And since I brought it up, I feel like it's a good time to make another comparison to the Battle of the Gods movie because I have a genuine problem with the ending to it. As you know, I've been comparing the anime adaptation to the movie that was released prior, right? Well, here's my issue with the movie's ending. In that version, after destroying the orange key ball, Goku is left powerless. Beerus wants Goku to say that he gives up, and Goku does. Goku admits defeat and says that he cannot beat Beerus. In the series, Beerus never asks Goku to give up, but instead, Goku tells Beerus that he cannot decide what his limit is. So let me just say this about the movie version. With the fate of the planet on the line, the lives of billions of people including his friends and family, giving up would mean that Beerus will destroy the Earth. Goku would never say that he gives up. He wouldn't. In reality, he would do what the anime version had him do. Use every last bit of power until he cannot continue to fight. I'm not too sure what the writing process was like for the movie, but that moment is horribly out of character for Goku. So I give a lot of props to the series writing team for changing that awful line. When I watched the anime version, you can imagine how I felt seeing Goku act in character, not giving up. That was one of my favorite parts about this episode too, seeing Beerus constantly get surprised by Goku's attitude and drive to win, despite the odds heavily stacked against him. I especially like the scene when Goku is pushing back the orange key ball. The voice acting from Sean Schemmel was incredible. All I want to say is that this scene was perfect. And while that scene was perfect, not everything about this episode was. The first thing that stuck out to me was when Goku was fighting underwater. They make it a point that he needs to breathe, but it's weird seeing Goku fight in space when there is also nothing for him to breathe. I could buy that in his god form, maybe that could allow him to breathe underwater or in space, even if there is no evidence to support that. But when that power fades, how can he breathe in space? And don't you tell me that they were in the outer atmosphere of the planet. Goku states it in episode 13 that they are in space. And just look at the shit. Are you really gonna see this and tell me that they aren't in space? Like, oh come on. It doesn't make sense. Goku does need to breathe. Another thing that I'm not fully on board with is the orange key ball being the result of Goku and Beerus' attacks merging together. Usually when key blasts connect, they either explode on impact or one overpowers the other. I'm pretty sure this is a new concept for Dragon Ball, and I'm not really liking it. I prefer the movie version where the key ball is Beerus' own attack. And lastly, the Pilaf gang leaves on a lifeboat. They haven't contributed a thing this entire arc, their inclusion was pointless. But that's not a problem for this episode specifically, but rather the series as a whole. But even with those negatives, honestly, it didn't affect my overall enjoyment of this episode at all. I still thought that this episode was amazing and a fantastic way to conclude this arc of Super. So my scoring for this episode is 5 out of 5. And just like that, the first arc of Dragon Ball Super is over. It's been a long ride, and I've been enjoying rewatching the series and reviewing each episode. Of course, that doesn't mean that the video is over yet. Oh no, I still need to review the arc as a whole, giving it the final scoring. Going into this review, I had initially thought to myself that Dragon Ball Super was this terrible series that only does wrong. In its initial release, I ended up dropping this series entirely when it got into the Resurrection F arc because I found it to be incredibly boring and unsatisfying to watch. But after reviewing 14 episodes of Dragon Ball Super, I now realize that these episodes have really good aspects about them. Looking at the fights, I really liked how when Super actually tried, it can make a fight engaging to watch, with every hit feeling impactful. As you know, this arc is an adaptation of a movie, so something else I also appreciated were some of the changes made to the story. The Vegeta cooking scene as well as Goku's unwillingness to give up were better changes as they are more in line to how these characters would normally act. Changes like that only improved the story. What I didn't like were changes that brought down the story, which there were a lot. One of the biggest examples that I have is the Pilaf gang. They were a small part in both the movie and the series, but in the series they overstay their welcome and they do not contribute to the story at all, making their inclusion meaningless. I know Mai will be a relevant character later on, but that's not until episode 47, and we need to get through 2 more story arcs to get to that point. I also thought that the exclusion of the Super Saiyan God backstory took away from the narrative as well. It's an interesting bit of lore knowing how a transformation that turns Saiyans into gods came to be. Just that alone raises so many more questions, like who was the guy who first became a god, how did the god form get completely forgotten by the Saiyans, and why the fuck does a Namekian book have knowledge of this ritual? None of these questions get answered, by the way. In a movie format where there is a stricter time limit, a short explanation works fine, but in a long formatted series, they should have had enough time to properly explain the details surrounding the god transformation and the ritual. Knowing that, what I'm trying to say was that there were a lot of changes that I liked and a lot of changes that I disliked. Unfortunately, there is an aspect of the show that can be applied to basically every episode, and that's the art and animation. Almost every single episode has instances of poor animation, and even when the animation is good, like in episode 10 and 11, the characters still look off-model. It's really distracting and makes the series feel cheap and lazy. I know that in the Blu-ray release of the series, a lot of the artwork was improved, but even so, you can still see its impact on the show. And if you watch Dragon Ball Super's episodes as they were originally being broadcast, the quality is even worse. As for the music, I actually thought that a lot of the tracks were pretty good. There was only one time that I felt that the music was out of place. And even so, that track isn't bad, it just does not fit the tone at the scene. But what really stuck out to me was that music that played during Goku's God transformation. It really is a beautiful track and fits perfectly with the tone of the scene. But still, the music now really can't even compare to the songs of old school Dragon Ball. I've been playing them as background music for this video, and listening to them again just gets me excited. Hopefully Super's music can capture that magic that the music once had, cause for the most part, it certainly doesn't have it now. You know, I was actually pretty surprised by how many episodes I ranked a 5 out of 5. Especially episode 14, since it was actually better than I expected it to be. Honestly, I thought the majority of episodes would be a 1 out of 5 or a 2 out of 5. But that isn't to say that Dragon Ball Super was wrongfully judged by me, oh not at all. Out of the 14 episodes, only 3 of them I felt were 5 out of 5s, and 4 of the episodes were 1 out of 5s. In fact, out of all the rankings, the majority of the episodes were a 1 out of 5. With that being said, the final score for this arc is a 42 out of 70, or a 60%. It's honestly pretty disappointing that a franchise this massive and popular ended up dropping the ball this hard on its first arc. I kinda expected a low score, but I will say this about it. Dragon Ball Super, the Battle of the Gods arc, is not that good. It has flaws everywhere, and they could easily overshadow the good, but no matter how bad you think this arc is, there is no way that it could be worse than the Resurrection F arc. Now that one really is garbage. By the way, Resurrection F just so happens to be in the next arc of the series, so you can expect a review of that sometime in the future. As for the Battle of the Gods arc, I came to the conclusion that there is nothing super about Dragon Ball Super. Well then, with that, we are all done with the Battle of the Gods arc of Dragon Ball Super. It was a lot of fun reviewing, and I'm excited to get into the Resurrection F arc of the series. If you are interested in hearing my thoughts on that, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, why not leave a like and a comment? I really do appreciate all the support, so thank you to everyone that has come along with me on my journey into becoming an online content creator. Until next time!